All right, and we're live. Hi, Mikkel. Welcome to the podcast. We are absolutely honored today to be here with Mikkel Aaland, who, for anybody who doesn't know, essentially wrote the book on sweat bathing and sweat bathing cultures. So we're going to start off, give us a bit of a history of the book Sweat and how you got into this industry and what fascinated you, and then a bit about the history of the book as well.
That's a pretty open-ended.
Yeah, we could be here for a good many days.
Okay, so we're going to have to transport ourselves back in time a bit. This is back in the 70s, before you guys were
a twinkle in our father's eyes.
Yeah, so I'm dating myself, but back in the 70s, and I've graduated from college, and this is that time after college, like what am I going to do with my life? Mm-hmm. I think young people can relate to this. I know my daughter can relate to this. Several jobs did not happen, and I had an opportunity to move to Helsinki, and the idea was to be there for maybe a few weeks, do some research. That's all it took, right, to have enough material to write a book. Well, little did I know that this subject is a little more, it requires more than a few weeks. I ended up living in Helsinki for a year and using that as my base because I realized that back then that the sauna, which is a Finnish bath, and which we all knew, even back in the 70s, we knew about the Finnish sauna. But the sauna is really just one type of sweat bath. And it was almost an epiphany when I realized that this is a phenomenon that's worldwide. Yeah. And Finland itself has really held on to a tradition in the face of times when a lot of people dropped their tradition. The Finns held on to the sweat bath, the sauna. But it was something that was found all over the world. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'm very young. And, I can live cheaply, I can hitchhike, I can live in youth hostels, I can do whatever it takes to get this done, which was a lot of fun, by the way, because I got to spend 3 years traveling around the world.
Wow.
Visiting sweat baths. Yeah. And I just connected the dots. And they hadn't really been connected in that way before, where people started understanding that this is a hot room where you go to sweat, and it has all kinds of different architecture, different customs, different rituals associated with it. But at the fundamental, basic, lowest common denominator, we go there to sweat. Yeah. So the book evolved over time. I went to Turkey. I was in Russia. I was in Japan. I was in Mexico, all over North America, Russia, Soviet Union at that time, and of course Finland. And Finland was always my base. Always coming back to Finland, and sat down and put this book together, which came out in 1978. We had a hard time with the title because, frankly, at that time, the word sweat did not have a lot of positive connotations. You may have heard this phrase before that, horses sweat, men perspire, and women glow. So the word sweat was not something that we thought it would be very marketable, to say the least. But I had a very, very, very forward-thinking, I think a great publisher who said, hey, because we came up with all kinds of titles. One of my favorite was Born of Fire, which that's a great title. Yeah. And, everything, all sweat baths at the basic, most fundamental level are based on fire, heat. So Born of Fire, I could go on and on. We had so many different titles. But my publisher at one point just said, hey, let's just call it what it is, sweat. Yeah. Nice. And then the wonderful subtitle, which then explains it all, illustrated, and just illustrated story, history, and description of, and then we name all the different types of sweat bath. Yeah. The book came out in 1978. It was a very exciting time for bathing. When I say bathing, I don't mean the American style of bathing, which was a shower.
Mm-hmm.
This was something that has been going on since the Industrial Revolution. The shower was a perfect answer to the need for people to be quick, efficient, and it was economical to a certain extent. So the shower was the dominant bath of the Americas in the 19th and 20th century. But in the 70s, we had some pretty exciting things going on.
Yeah.
That are not dissimilar to what's happening here now, where people were starting to say, hey, there's more to this thing than just, superficial cleaning.
Yeah.
And the hot tub became very popular in the early 70s. There was a lot of countercultural movement around sweat lodges, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I took lots of sweat lodges, both with Native Americans and with counterculture communities. So it was going on really strong when the book came out in 1978, kind of hit the zeitgeist. Then something came around the corner and hit us hard, and that was called AIDS.
Yeah.
And the AIDS epidemic just decimated the bathing scene because everything shut down, much like what happened with COVID.
Yeah.
And it was like, ooh, bad timing.
Yeah.
Because people we were terrified of being in public spaces together at the early stages of AIDS.
Yeah.
I remember we closed down swimming halls, bathhouses closed down. People didn't want to be next to each other because we didn't know how it was transmitted back then.
Yeah.
So sweat kind of, it went underground.
Yeah.
And it's resurfaced, obviously.
Yeah.
And thankfully, in a more exciting time right now, and it's revived. And I'm very happy to say that the book is still evergreen in the sense that I think I hit things. I mean, there's things, of course, that are dated. I mean, I'm dated. Look at the picture at the back of the book. Boy, that was a long time ago. But it's really exciting to have a book that 45 years later is still
relevant. Yeah.
And people pay for it. So I'm actually paying real money for it.
I paid real money for this one. It sounds like I got a bargain, but it's still hundreds of
£200 with a deal.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. So
gold dust. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of bathing experiences that you had on your journey and that are covered in the book as well. So
don't ask me about the weirdest sauna I've ever been in. You asked me that yesterday, and I have been twisting my head around for 24 hours now to try to answer your question. What's the weirdest sweat?
Yeah.
Right? No, I'm not going to. Let's just go back to your question. So what was exciting for me, and it's even more exciting now, is that I started noticing that this phenomena that is worldwide. It's as common as the baking of bread and squeezing of the grape. It's almost like we're born to sweat. Mm-hmm. This is something that we do. We probably have been doing it since we were first in a cave and the fire was heated up and and this magical stuff came out of our skin. The water's born of the heated man, as poetically said. And sweat took on all kinds of magical connotation because it comes from fire. I mean, everything. At the very core and at kind of the foundation of the sweat bath is what we've done is we've harnessed the power of fire. And harnessing fire, it's been oftentimes said to be the start of civilization.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, in terms of the sweat bath, you're taking fire and through the medium of rocks and steam, imbuing it inside. You're taking on this power, and the water's born of that. The moisture that comes out of our bodies, sweat, is a product of that. So sweat takes on a real magical connotation among most cultures.
That's so poetic. It's almost like there's a deeply spiritual element to
It's
it.
foundational.
Yeah.
It's foundational to the sweat bath. And I've often said that one of the things about the sweat bath that really separates it from most other human activity is that under one roof or one type of dwelling, you have something that's social because you sit together and sweat. You have something that's extremely physical. Anybody that sits in high temperature experiences the body's transformation physically.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, which we cannot ignore, is the spiritual aspect of it. And I don't mean necessarily from a religious point of view, but spiritual in the sense that you're connecting yourself with something bigger than yourself. Actually, you're connecting with yourself, first of all, and then you're connecting with what I say is, I guess, you could almost generically say nature. So you have three things that you very rarely find in human activity under one roof.
Yeah.
You have the social, the spiritual, and the physical.
Yeah.
So this fundamental power that's derived from that really you start to make sense that this phenomena is universal, or nearly universal.
What you're describing reminds me of an ethnography that I read about tribal communities in Russia who use sweat bathing, and they don't call it banya like Russians would. They talk about sweat bathing before they go out hunting, and they use whisks. And they go to the sauna, so it's usually the men who will go to the sauna. They'll use these whisks to clean themselves. And I remember reading about like how it's important that they get the stones hot, but they don't make it smoky, because the whole thing they're trying to do is deodorize themselves for going hunting, right?
Sure.
So they're using the whisks to get rid of the fats and oils in their skin. They deodorize themselves, they clean themselves, and then they get ready to go out hunting. And the cardinal rule is that once they've been to this sweat lodge, they stay away from the children. Because they say that children are the smell, because they've deodorized themselves, right? And children, people joke, okay, children are smelly things, right? But they smell very much like human, like they have every, all the smells that you could think of. So they once they've done that, they're separated from the group. But there's also a spiritual element in there as well, and the sort of idea of preparation to go and do something, separating themselves from the rest of the group. So
that's oftentimes it's. Besides, that's kind of a real practical aspect of the bath, of cleanliness.
Yeah.
But the idea is that when you've exposed yourself most of the time naked in the heat and you emerge after a certain amount of time, there's a comparison with the birthing process, and the idea that we're reborn as a result of this process.
Yeah.
That's very common in most bathing, any kind of description of a bath, whether it be North America, Native Americans, or the Japanese, and this idea of being reborn. There's so many things that are, I call spiritual, that happen. One of my favorite things is, I just learned this recently, that how the Japanese describe that feeling that when you come out, which it's a special feeling once you've emerged from a sweat bath, and they came up with a word. It's an old Japanese word that's been used in other connotations, but it's recently being used now to describe that feeling when you come out, feeling reborn and connected. And the word is totonota. Totonata. And the way they say it varies depending on how they feel. But what it means, I'm in tune. I'm in tune.
That's
and
nice.
I love that. It's like, think about it. You go into a sauna, you go into a sweat bath, and you're fragile. You're frayed. You're feeling disjointed. You're fragmented. And you come out, and now this harmony, you feel the harmony that you didn't feel before. Totono, ta. And I just love that you come up, words have power, as you know. We all know that. So when you put a word on something, and the Japanese are brilliant at doing that, they did that, and now they come out and they pretty much, use that word in its variations. And I think it really helps people understand that this is a really magical thing that just happened.
I love the expression as you're saying it. It sounds exactly like you're just kind of
onomatopoeic.
Yeah, it is.
Totally. And like I said, it's the way I said it. You could go totonota.
Yeah.
No, totonota.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was good.
And
That was
even
good.
me saying it right now and hearing myself,
Yeah.
I know I'm not in tune.
Yeah.
This is what's interesting.
Yeah.
I know it because I've done this. I've used this word before
Yeah.
when I've come out, and I know I'm hearing myself say it differently now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to be in tune with you guys.
Yeah.
You guys are really fun to be with,
Yeah.
and we've had a great couple days
Yeah.
or 24 hours, and we've been in tune at moments. But the fact is, it's we're not always in tune.
No.
You hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You're out
Yeah.
there in the traffic.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden,
The
we're
dissonance
out. We're just out a little
back
bit,
in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a little bit off key.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're
Wow.
total no tall up to a point.
Yeah. So you went out to Japan. You obviously covered Native American sweat bathing as well. What other cultures had you experienced in that initial sort of 3 years of traveling? Where did for those who haven't the benefit of the book or access to the book, give them a bit of an overview of where it leads you and what kind of experiences are covered.
So it's almost like I should say, where isn't there sweat bathing?
Yeah.
But because there are places in the world that I've discovered that really don't have a sweat bathing culture.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, Russia, the Banya, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, talking about a culture passionate for their bathing. The Russians' passion for bathing is just, and for the Banya.
Yeah.
And the Banya, as you know, is very similar to the Finnish style sauna, but with variations in the way that the Russians approach that, as the Russians are different than the Finns.
Yeah.
So the Russians, and then all over the Middle East, you have the hammam, and the hammam is another form of the sweat bath. It's a variation in that you have something that's very in Finland, of course, the cold winters. You have the harsh climate. You have a different culture. So the sauna will be hot, very hot. Oftentimes, too hot for many people. It'll be a shorter duration. It's more quick, more slam bam. Thank you, ma'am. And then you get down into the Middle East, and you get into the hammam, and the hammam is a shrunken version of the giant thermae.
Okay.
And the giant thermae were the Roman baths.
Yeah.
And the Romans were of that era were probably the greatest. Well, I would say is almost unequivocally the greatest bathing culture of all time. Because wherever the Romans went, they built these giant thermae that would accommodate thousands of people.
Yeah.
And these thermae didn't only have a sweat room, but they also had a steam room. They had libraries. They had
Cold plunges.
everything, cold
Yeah.
plunges, swimming pools, a lot of intellectual discourse.
Yeah.
Plays were given there. So this was a complex where the sweat house or the sweat component was the heart of it.
Yeah. Well,
So the Roman Empire took baths everywhere, and you promised me someday to take me to a Roman bath up here.
Yeah, so ideologically, I mean, the Romans took sweat bathing as part of the civilization aspect. So, like the propaganda of the Roman Empire is beyond our borders is barbarism, and civilization ends at this point. And one of the big points of civilization for them, and so some of the genius of the kind of strategy of occupation, is build people roads, build people nodal points where they can gather, build a fort there so you can police it, and build a bathhouse there.
Absolutely.
And if you've got good wine, nice baths, and olive oil, like most people are halfway to civilization at that point. So, yeah,
absolutely. So what happened in the Middle East was these giant thermae. The Prophet Muhammad said, he's really into cleanliness. I mean, the guy I'm no disrespect at all. The Prophet Muhammad had loved cats, for example, because cats clean themselves all the time, and so in that world of that time, cleanliness was very important, but not only of the body but of the spirit. So the hammam, which uses a lot of the Roman heating methods and the architecture to a certain extent, but shrunken.
Yeah.
So the hammam became, which means, by the way, spreader of warmth. I love that poetic name, spreader of warmth, became adjuncts to mosques. And so you do your purification, your physical purification and your spiritual purification before going to the mosque. And these spread all over the Middle East. And now, even today, especially today, you find the hammam is become very popular.
I mean, still even today, right? Before you go to mosque, there's areas where you clean yourself. And when I was working out in the Middle East, 5 times a day, if I was driving on the motorway, a tune would play on the radio, which would mean it's time for the call to prayer. Yeah. And at that time, the motorways would just empty, and all of these people would pull up on the hard shoulder, and then you'd see them washing their hands in sand, and then they would put the prayer rugs out, face Mecca, and then they would pray. And that was the best time to avoid traffic because
I have a lot of respect for that culture, and for the attitudes towards the bath and hygiene and the spiritual cleanliness. So anyway, this journey, this travel just went on and on and on. Every culture I went to, it was fascinating. The Japanese culture, that's a culture that's very contemporary and has held on to bathing traditions for thousands of years. And their passion, for bathing is almost unrivaled now as well. So, but every type of bath you can imagine.
Yeah, they've really latched on to sauna there, which is amazing.
Yes.
Obviously they're an onsen. We spoke the other day about sort of cultures that lean more towards hot bathing as opposed to hot rooms. And we talked about in the UK, for example, how baths were ubiquitous until the mid-90s, and then all of a sudden everybody started getting showers, and there was a time in the early 90s where if you had a shower, people would go, ooh, they're cosmopolitan, they're very European. And the people who had a shower in their house would probably also have a bidet in their house as well. So it would be like somebody who'd been on holiday to Europe, and and it changed very quickly. And Japan is one of those cultures where they've had thermal bathing for a long time, but it's been around hot water.
Not everywhere. Most places they have some form of hot spring or thermal, but there's some areas around the inland sea that really don't have quite the thermo activity.
Okay.
And there you find variations on the sweat house.
Okay.
You find a cave, the Mushi-Buro, which is it's a cave, literally a cave that has a hot fire in it that heats up and you go in.
Yeah.
I went to something called a kiln bath, Mushi-Buro, a kiln bath that has been used continuously for 600 years.
Wow.
And it's apparently it came from Korea, but it very much looks like a bread oven.
Okay.
And they heat up a fire inside and in the morning, and the fire, incredibly hot, heats up the clay. Yeah. And then the fire is put out, and bathers go in all day long. Wow. And it holds the heat in the mass of the whatever that material is, and they sweat bathe there. Wow. So that's an inland sea area. Yeah. And then other areas where they have steam from thermo activity, they'll actually make steam baths based on the thermal activity. Okay. So the Japanese, they have found just about any way, in any shape or form, a way to bathe. Yeah. I've been in sand baths on the beach in the southern part of Japan where you dig a hole in the sand because there's hot thermal water, and you put the sand over you and you sit there on the beach and sweat. Hot coffee beans that are heated up and you soak in the hot. I mean, this is a culture that really gets bathing. Yeah. I love going to Japan, as you can imagine. Yeah. I feel right at home.
I think it's absolutely testament to their bathing culture as well that I recently came across a little mini documentary talking about how the oldest company in the world is an onsen in Japan. Yeah. And it's I can't remember how many generations, or it'll be a absolute misquote if I leap in there and suggest it's 1,000 years old, but it's really, really old.
It's really old. Yeah. And then of course, what was really interesting was going to Mexico. Oh yeah. And the Mayan Aztec bath, the Temescal. Yeah. The hot bath of the Aztec Mayan culture which is still in use today. It had its own variation of heating and architecture, but as much as part of their culture as any bathing culture, going back thousands of years.
Yeah.
That's another fascinating type of sweat bath.
And are people reinventing that for sort of modern times, or are they sort of, do we have a good understanding of how that was used then, and are we doing a sort of, a good appropriation of that in modern times?
No, there's a continuous use. When I wrote Sweat, I went to villages and found Temescals.
Yeah.
I mean, these are villages you couldn't even drive to.
Yeah.
So it had a certain, I guess, I don't want to use the word primitive, but rural aspect to it.
Yeah.
But the last time I was in Mexico, we were preparing for another project, and we were at Tepoztlan, outside of Mexico City. The Temescal, which had been kind of somewhat isolated when I was there in the 70s, was on every corner.
Okay.
It's become like the hip thing to do is to make a temescal in the ancient way, and the young people are going there and using it. Because they're holding back, they're grabbing back the old culture, and they realize how important the Temescal was with their ancestors.
Yeah.
And here we have this revival going on.
Yeah.
That's not dissimilar to the revival we're finding here in the West with the sauna and other bathing forms.
Yeah.
So this bathing phenomena, and I guess that's what I could say about the 70s. I think I just got a hint of what was to come.
Yeah.
This was things that, it's almost like, the noise level was really low. The baths were very kind of underground. They were quiet. It wasn't that much activity, but it was coming. You could just feel it.
So since that time in the 70s, we've obviously gone through such a massive wave of globalization with thanks to the internet, and we're so much more interconnected. And sure, there's this really palpable revival in all of the sweat bathing, as you say. But have you noticed that there's kind of evolution to any of the practices now that everyone's talking to one another and sharing and comparing notes?
That's really a good question. I mean, before the internet, it took time for this dissemination of information. Everything was, there's always been some kind of, fusion going on throughout time. But now it's accelerated. And what I like about it, this is what I really am excited about, is that I think people are starting to understand, let's just say you live here, and what's beautiful about sitting here in Great Britain is that you guys really lost your bathing culture. I mean, you didn't have a bathing. You're famous for not having a bathing culture.
Great unwashed.
And it's almost like, you just stuck your fingers up, your thumb up to the Romans and say, if you guys liked it, we don't like it.
Yeah.
But so for a long time, you didn't have anything. But it gives you a little bit of a blank slate right now. And what I love what's going on here, what I really enjoy, is that there is that reaching out to all these other cultures, and so people are going to Estonia, they're going to Lithuania, and they're picking and choosing certain rituals from these different countries, even in the Middle East, Turkey. Obviously, the Finnish sauna is being looked at, and so you get this kind of a fusion thing going on.
Yeah.
But not only is it a fusion, but I think there's also a certain amount of respect for where these different bathing styles are coming from.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, it's like wine.
Yeah.
In the old days, you could buy wine in a box.
Yeah.
Or worse yet, in a square bottle that you unscrew it and it cost nothing and was terrible. But now you go into a wine shop and you can pick between South African wine, Australian, and you can really decide, what do I like?
Yeah.
And I think what's happening here in Great Britain is that people are starting to get that same sophistication with what was going on, what's gone on with wine and maybe even food, if you look back in time. In America, we didn't even know French cuisine until Julia Child came around, right?
But what you're describing actually is it was the same. The UK has really transformed a lot in the last 50 years, and I think certainly in the 70s, the height of cuisine might be going to a Bania Inn and having chicken in a basket, or if you were really exotic, you might have gone to an Indian restaurant where actually they the restaurants then had made a sort of British Indian version of Indian food. You know, the tikka masala, chicken tikka masala. Like you'll never find those kind of dishes in India, but here they've sort of a spin on cuisine. And there was this weird sort of period of poor appropriation where people just wanted a flavor of the of the rest of the world. They didn't want the real thing because that would have been too much at the time, but they wanted a flavor of it.
And I think gently,
regardless of people's sort of broader political views, with the nature of colonialism over the last couple of 100 years, the UK has become really an epicenter of so many different cultures and so many different flavors and so many different nationalities, which personally I think is great. And what that does is it means, and one thing that we sort of learnt to do, and we've and we're still learning to do, is look at the appropriation of experiences and be really serious and respectful about how it should work and why it is the way it is, so that rather than having, sauna flavored experience, you have authentic sauna experience, and that's something that we're really big on. Is like, hey, we started this focused on the Finnish experience, and then as we focused on saying, hey guys, you've been doing it wrong, there's a really enjoyable way of having a proper sauna, then you scratch beneath the surface and you go into the little idiosyncrasies of like a Lithuanian pirtis versus a Finnish sauna, or a Swedish bastu or Norwegian bastu. That's they're just little idiosyncrasies that make things that little bit different. And when you explore those and understand them, then exactly what you've said, you can say, well, I like this more than I like that.
Yeah, it gives people a choice. Education is key, as you know. That's why it was important for me to do the book Sweat.
Yeah.
And out of Sweat has come the TV series.
And that was my next question.
Which is called Perfect Sweat.
Yeah.
And that's 7 episodes based on the book.
Yeah.
There were supposed to be 9, but COVID kind of shut us down. But we managed 7, and hopefully that series called Perfect Sweat will find its way into the airways here, or to your local station, because the idea of showing people variation. That means somebody who doesn't like necessarily the really hot heat of a Finnish style sauna may very much more enjoy a Turkish Hammam or a Islamic Hammam.
Yeah.
So I just want people to sweat.
Yeah.
and I want them to understand that there's many ways to do it, and you have a lot of choices. And when you have choices, then you show, and also to show the respect that you were talking about the traditions behind that. Now, what's also interesting to me is something which the food industry knows. It's called the fusion. And when the fusion occurs, that's also really interesting. You get these variations that are amalgams of different cultures.
Yeah.
And I think there's definitely a place for that as well.
So are you thinking like Alfgus Hammams,
Well, I think Alfgus itself is a kind of a Finnish anathema. But it could be an that would, an Alfgus Hammam. That would be an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. But anyway, it's a really fun time for bathing.
Yeah.
It's a really good time for bathing. People like me and you who are in that, who get this, who get it. We get it, right? We understand. This is not something, it's not a fly-by-night thing.
No.
It's not something trivial. I think we all, anybody in this space that we're in, really passionately believe that this is something that can change the world. This is not something, to take lightly, because we've experienced what happens when we go into the bath. We feel the personal transformation. We feel the community transformation. I think it's a big thing.
Yeah, it's a movement.
It's a movement, and I think it's come at a right place, the right time. We have to be careful. There are a lot of things that we've learned, or I've learned, looking at history, where bathing has come up and down in popularity through periods, and I've learned a lot by looking at the past to kind of watch out for the future. There's certain things like what I mentioned earlier, the 3 pillars: the social, the spiritual, and the physical. If those 3 pillars, if you want to call them that, are in place, you've got a strong bathing culture. But if you start taking down any one of those pillars, and we have to be very careful about this because it's very easy to take away, for example, the spiritual or the social.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have a human activity that it's just not. It's very susceptible to being knocked over.
Yeah.
And the other thing we have to watch out for, we learned this in COVID, is to be prepared for things like disease and pandemics. They're going to come again.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So we have to really understand what happened last time.
Yeah.
What can we do in the future? Because the bath itself, it can be a real positive force, but it can also be a transmitter of disease. So, we got to acknowledge that. We have to look at the good and the bad, and treat it with respect and understand it. And there's a lot of it's a double-edged sword. Is what I'm trying to say.
Well,
you have to understand it's powerful.
I think the movement aspect of it seems to, particularly here, and this is something we talked about with Charlie on the last episode of the podcast, is the community aspect of it seems to be in the UK particularly driven by the fact that the church and the community that the church used to be was so integral to every single village, every single community. And now a lot of people living in big cities who are feeling lonelier than ever. And what we've just hosted, for the benefit of the listeners, we've just hosted our sort of solstice celebration. Mikkel was fantastic enough to, generous enough to come up and visit us and see us at the tail end of that. And so many people there were, not regular sauna goers who were, waking up to that experience for the first time. And it was transformative. But the transformative part of it is not just the heat by itself. And the people in there wouldn't be in there if they were by themselves. It's the community aspect. And everybody, it's impossible to sit in a sauna and not speak to somebody. And, anywhere I go, it doesn't matter which saunas it is, whether it's in Finland, whether it's in Estonia or the Baltics, I always find myself going in there and then somebody will say something and somebody else will make a comment and then suddenly there's a full-blown discussion that evolves out of that. And I think that is, one of the big things of that movement. The health benefits aspect and the feeling good is like an icing on the cake, but I think the thing that will push this movement forward is the community aspect.
But the health is important. I think that's what I was trying to say, is you have the healthy part. We know that, and that's it's okay to focus, to put a little focus on that. I'm just saying, don't just focus on one of the three.
Yeah.
All three of those things work in harmony together to make this a really powerful experience.
You're completely right.
Yeah.
So the episodes of the series cover, you say 7 episodes. Talk us roughly through what each episode looks at and what they cover.
They're half-an-hour episodes. We managed to do the Finnish episode, of course. That was the first one. And then we went to Russia and for the Russian Banya, which I'm now calling the Slavic Banya, because it turns out that the Banya is something that's part of the Slavic culture.
Yeah.
And then we went to Japan, of course, and we did Turkey for the Turkish bath. We did the Aufguss, wonderful episode on the Aufguss. I think it's really super. And then one of my favorite episodes is Burning Man. We went to Burning Man in the desert of Nevada. And there we found so many different aspects of sweat culture being used, from the banya to the sauna to steam baths, and it's really become part of the whole ethos of Burning Man. And then we did a Norwegian kind of origin story from my point of view, the Bastu. So I think that's the 7 episodes. And
yes.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to the Mayan Temescal, which I would have loved to have done, the Native American Sweatlodge. But anyway, I think we did a great job. I'm really proud of it. One thing that I've kind of evolved to now, and I really want to have a chance to, I know we're running a little tight on time, is the project that I'm working on right now.
Sauna Aid.
Yeah, please. This is where,
so this is
obviously you can see my passion for sweat and how it starts, and I've certainly evolved from someone who literally, individual passion for sweating to then my friends and my family, and then the community aspect. So I've kind of evolved through these stages, and the stage I'm in now is an understanding that this sauna, in this case the Finnish style sauna, can be a perfect vehicle to be used to help people that are going through some kind of either man-made crisis or natural disaster. And about a year and a half ago, we started something called Sauna Aid.
Yeah.
And I just can't speak highly enough of the whole movement behind, and the idea behind Sauna Aid is that sauna, we really believe the sauna can be not only transformative on this level that we just talked about, the personal and community level, but it can come into an area that's having a serious problem and act as a catalyst for wellness. The idea really starts in a way in Japan during the Fukushima nuclear disaster, where the Japanese Sauna Association came in with a tent sauna and decontaminated people that had been exposed to radiation.
Wow!
So this was in our mind when the Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred, and we saw these massive exodus of refugees, I guess you could call them, leaving Ukraine, and also the destruction of infrastructure there around their bathing culture, because they're like the Russian, the Banya is a big part of the Ukrainian culture as well. And we said, this is where Sauna Aid, where we could come in and make a difference. So we immediately got an international coalition together of people from all over the world, actually, and started working together with different ways of helping the Ukrainians in this particular area. So we created a training program for bath attendants so they could recognize trauma, because a lot of the people leaving have been traumatized by the war. And it's very important if you're a bath attendant to understand what's going on with trauma or post-traumatic stress. We also immediately started building a tent sauna that we shipped down to Ukraine, very big industrial scale tent sauna. We brought in a container sauna to the eastern area of Ukraine. So we're really trying hard to help the Ukrainians in a way that we feel is very well. There's no war in sauna.
Yeah.
So we're not supporting bombs and guns. This is a peaceful humanitarian mission.
Yeah.
And I'm going around trying to raise funds for it, because everything takes money, of course. And we have some really exciting projects planned in the future for Ukraine. And I really hope people understand that the sauna itself, it's wonderful when you enjoy it, when your friends enjoy it, when your community enjoy it, but it can also be used in this other way to help people in need.
I think the critics out there as well might hear about things like Sauna Aid and think, well, actually, in a hierarchy of needs, like especially here in the UK, people might think, hey, this is a luxury. Why are you, this is if somebody hasn't got bread and water, what are you doing giving them saunas? But what people don't appreciate is, as you've said, this is a huge part of a lot of people's culture. This is not a luxury to them. This is a huge part of everyday life and culture. But also, again, looking back at the community sauna baths episode that we did with Charlie, talking about the community aspect and the outreach aspect, and even the prescriptive.
Using it as part of rehabilitation,
using it as rehab and bringing different communities together. That this is not a luxury. This is a necessity and a treatment facility in an area where there's a lot of people who need a lot of treatment, both physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, in a war-torn country. It brings people
practically
together.
Speaking as well, that or the infrastructure losses that you've been talking about, these people deserve a basic right to wash and keep themselves hygienic and warm, and without electricity, how can they do that?
That's why our saunas have been wood burning stoves.
Amazing.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and the other thing is we're focused on Ukraine now, which is obvious need, but I could very well see Sauna Aid being involved with other communities, in local communities, homeless communities,
Deprived.
where to have some kind. When you're clean, you feel better. It's about self-respect. Cleanliness is not a luxury.
Yeah.
And what we have found with the sauna, when you're in the sauna and you're bathing in this way, where you're cleaning from the inside out, it's transformative in so many ways. So I could see Sauna Aid very easily moving into urban areas as well.
And I think that I'd love to see that. I think you've described this over the last few days as well. That I could see community sauna baths really being the first sort of stepping stone to repairing some of those, some of the rifts in communities where, as you say, whether it's homelessness or whether it's loneliness or whether it's mental health issues or just helping in the community, bringing people together, identifying people who are perhaps vulnerable that can be supported, and making sure, as you say, people are clean and well looked after. So, this is something that we're keen to support you with as well, Mikkel. So yeah, Finnmark definitely behind supporting Sauna Aid.
Well, we really appreciate your help. Thank you so much. And I know your heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
And I think what I really appreciate also, you're running a really good business.
Thank you.
I love the way you're working here, and the people here have great morale. What I'm seeing is really impressive. I love that part of it. But you're a business. At the end of the day, you're a business, and that's we need businesses like you. What I want people to understand is that running parallel to that is something that is outside of the world of business. It's that the humanitarian side. It's like we want to run with you, parallel to you.
Yeah.
And I like that we're doing that now. And obviously we're trying to get as many people in the business to understand this is good for the big ecosystem that we have this other kind of nonprofit humanitarian side, which is Sauna Aid, which goes in without any profit motive at all. In fact, we're a nonprofit, so I think we definitely, the partnerships are there, and I appreciate so much your support.
So, what do people do if they want to support this? Anybody listening to this, you guys have. Where can they donate? How can they support if they've got good ideas about how they can get more saunas in there?
Yeah, this is great. So the initiative is under the auspices of the International Sauna Association, which is an international organization, nonprofit. It's got associates everywhere in 30 different countries. Maybe it's 40 now. I don't know. It's ever growing. So we're underneath the umbrella of the ISA out of Helsinki, and we have a website, sauna-aid.com. sauna-aid.com, and you can go there and donate straight through PayPal. There's several of the people here in Great Britain have, the ones in Hackney, the baths there have had special events. Yeah, perfect. And we really encourage special events that are around the Sauna Aid theme, and then the money collected, maybe a percentage of the gate or the take is brought in, and then we can range ways to get the money straight through bank transfers. There's lots of ways to help Sauna Aid, but go to the website and you can check us out. And I really hope people understand that it's a really very worthwhile cause.
Yeah. And if you want to see the outcomes of that work, there's photos and videos available on the site. You can see the positive impact it's having.
Absolutely. I just came back from Ukraine a few weeks ago where I was able to go in there and meet locals and see our saunas in use and get more feedback from them about what they want. I've posted some of the information about our next project, which will be it's a community-based sauna that will be on a lake right near Kharkiv, which will service the community, the whole civilian side. There's pictures there. We're also working with an Estonian group called Saunas for being the number for Ukraine. They're very specifically bringing in mobile saunas to the front line.
Yeah, for the
and
soldiers.
we're very supportive of what they're doing. We're more on the civilian side of things, but Saunas for Ukraine, highly, I'm tremendous respect for what they're doing right now as well. So also, I think that's saunaforukraine.com, something like that. But anyway, between the two groups, I think we're really covering things nicely in Ukraine.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Great. So if anybody can find the book, good luck. Definitely look out for that. It's Sweat, the perfect sweat, hopefully coming out on some TV platform at some point. There's a few different channels. It looks like it might be coming out soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Worst case, it'll probably be on YouTube in a few years' time. So. And
Right, that's true.
yeah, and then of course go and have a look at Sauna Aid and Saunas for Ukraine, and go donate some money. It's a great cause. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Mikkel. It's been a real pleasure for us, and just to get to know you. And I hope this is the start of a great support relationship. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
Cheers.